Synthetics by Lucas Alpi. Chapter 4. The first thing Stephen felt was warmth. The black bag was gone, ripped from his head the moment they landed. His skin drank in the early morning light. The sensation foreign after so many weeks of cold, sterile rooms and artificial lights that never dimmed. The heat spread across his face, seeping into him like a slow-burning fire. Before him, the world breathed. A wide-open airfield stretched out in all directions, runways gleaming under the rising sun. Beyond them, a flat landscape of hangars and terminals stood quiet in the early morning haze. A few planes sat idly in the distance, their hulking silhouettes outlined against the sky. The air smelled different here, thicker, real, alive. Stephen exhaled.
"You walk,"
a voice said, snapping him from the moment.
"We'll watch when you're out."
He turned. The speaker was a thin man with ropes of veins running down his arms. Tanned, sleeveless floral shirt, aviators. The sunglasses did little to soften the cold edge of his glare. He didn't look like a soldier, but he felt like one, posture stiff, every muscle coiled like a wire that had never been cut loose. Stephen had the sudden urge to tell him to smile. Not smiling made him look older, but instead he nodded. The facade began. He wasn't about to screw up this precious gift of freedom that the respectable, ever-secretive government of America had bestowed upon him. He was lucky to be alive. The jet's cabin door swung open, flooding the space with fresh air and golden light. The other passengers, all playing the same role as him, shifted as the illusion was put into place. Fake baggage was pulled from under their seats. Tourist guides were handed out, the glossy pages flashing bright, ridiculous colors.
"That's the best look of a tourist you have?"
Stephen didn't dare to analyze the details too much. He kept his thoughts blank, his expression neutral, and followed the steps as they had been instructed. They entered the airport, a massive terminal filled with the sounds of rolling luggage, distant PA announcements, and the dull hum of early morning travelers. He moved through customs, presenting his passport with detached indifference. Bag on the scanner, smile when necessary, and don't overthink it. The others peeled off into different directions, scattering like droplets in a storm. And yet, as he walked, he could feel it. Their eyes, watching, tracking every movement. Their guns, hidden, quiet, but ready. There was probably a sniper somewhere, tucked away in some obscure airport vantage point, waiting. He wasn't important enough to be worth this level of paranoia. But in this country, paranoia was policy. It made sense in theory. It just didn't feel great when you were the one living through it. So Stephen did what he did best. He acted normal. He thought about his wife, his daughter, home, and he walked forward. The outside air hit him like a slap. The sun had climbed higher now, and the streets outside the terminal were already alive with motion. Cars flowing through the pickup lanes, people pulling their luggage toward waiting cabs. A taxi driver stood near the curb, holding a cardboard sign with Stephen's name. Thin, too thin, long hair, too unkempt, eyes glazed with boredom, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Stephen stared. He didn't look like an agent. But then again, who did? Without a word, Stephen raised a hand, acknowledging him, then stepped into the cab. The moment the door shut, his body exhaled. For the first time in weeks, he breathed without a lodging restraint. Through the window, the city moved past him in a blur, cars weaving, people walking, life happening. It was fluent, it was real, and yet the paranoia remained. The driver could be one of them. Or maybe they'd installed cameras in the car. Maybe it was the black sedan behind them, maybe his new neighbor when he got home. Endless possibilities. But the one certainty, they were still watching. He barely made it inside before she crashed into him.
"Daddy!"
His daughter's voice was the warmest thing he'd heard in weeks. Small arms wrapped around him, squeezing tight, her body trembling with excitement. His wife was close behind, eyes wide, wet, disbelief carved into her face.
"Someone called.
she whispered, shaking her head.
They said there was a problem.
A pause, then the words came out in a broken, breathless rush.
They said you wouldn't be coming home.
Stephen placed a hand on her arm, rubbing slow, soothing circles.
But I'm here now.
He said softly.
For good. I'm not going anywhere.
Her lips trembled.
Promise me.
I promise.
She laughed then, a strange mix of joy, relief, and exhaustion.
They gave us compensation.
She sniffled.
A lot. Too much.
Over late breakfast, he learned the number. It wasn't a payout. It was a life-altering fortune, more zeros than he could count in a glance. A house, security, a future already built before them. He could pay for his daughter's education 10 times over. Hell, maybe even another daughter, a son, a dog. By noon, Stephen couldn't stop smiling. Despite the weeks of isolation, the questions, the paranoia, he felt rested, energized, unstoppable. By 3 he was dancing. Sinatra played from the speakers, and he grabbed his wife by the waist, twirling her across the living room. Step forward, step back, a twist, a dip. She laughed, full, genuine, carefree. For a few hours they forgot everything. By 8 they were at the most expensive restaurant in the city. The waitress hesitated at first, but a few Benjamins later, they had the best seat in the house. They drank, laughed, became their younger selves again, and for once they lived without thinking. When they got home, they paid the babysitter extra. She refused, but they insisted.
It's nothing.
His wife said, pressing the bills into her hand.
Spend it on something, or save it. You deserve it. Besides, we called you late. Just take it, honey.
The girl left, eyes wide, hands shaking. That night, they made love. Soft, slow. Careful with the noises so their daughter wouldn't be disturbed. Shh, Stephen whispered against her skin, breath warm against her ear. His hand rested on her stomach, thinking of a son. They fell asleep facing each other, the way they used to when they were 25, in a shitty room in L.A., a lifetime ago. And in the morning, Stephen died.